Welcome to the Harmony Hall of Friends podcast. So, Gerard Salonga, welcome to the Harmony Hall of Friends podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me to this, Paul. It's always a pleasure to see you and
Oh,
chat.
thank you. Thank you very much. Gerard, I'm particularly delighted to speak to you on this charity podcast because you may remember it was actually through a charity performance that we did together in the Hong Kong Cultural Centre. That's when I first met you a few years ago. So, Gerard, I'm going to embarrass you a little bit because I've worked, as you know, with many conductors, but I'm finding it difficult to think of many conductors as versatile as you are. I mean, you're completely at home conducting great orchestras in the classical repertoire, the operatic repertoire. You're par excellence as far as music theatre is concerned. You even co-founded a studio orchestra, superb arranger, composer, and you're working with top orchestras and musicians. I mean, it's not bad, is it? But
It's all
can,
right. It's turned
it,
out pretty well.
you're doing okay. But the thing is and we'll talk about that a little bit. But I was wondering, could you take us right back to the beginning? How did it all start for you?
When I was 5 years old, my older sister Leia, who's pretty famous, started taking piano lessons. So she was 7 and I was 5, and it looked like fun, and I wanted to try it too. That's basically all it was. So I started taking the piano lessons at 5, and uh, soon after that, it really became the I don't know. Some people refer to it as the secret door to a different world, or the imaginary friend that you have. Spend all afternoon just working stuff out on the instrument, and it really takes hold.
Yeah,
It becomes that part of your life, a really close part of your life, and it's just never stopped. Really, it's the kind of activities have changed. I'm no longer spending days practicing scales and Mozart and all that stuff, but um, it's really that big of a part of my life, really,
yeah.
and you really don't. It's difficult to make to distinguish, where the work aspect of it ends. It's just that part of you. You really,
Yeah.
it's so blurred for musicians, because
Yeah.
we never stop being musicians. We're just musicians all the time.
Yeah. It's funny to hear you say that because I mean, so many, that is the story of so many musicians. I think a lot of people think there's a very career-minded path that musicians take, and certainly what you're talking about with you is exactly my story as well. You kind of practice and you meet people, and eventually you end up at a music conservatoire. I don't know how, and then eventually somebody asks you to play, and they give you some money. That's kind of it.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much the template for just about everybody I've met, colleagues. Yep, that's how it went for all of us, pretty much. At the time, I was around 7, and my sister was about 9. She was already professional musical theater performer. She started doing recording projects. So when there's a recording session and they take me along, I get to meet all the musicians. I get to meet the arrangers, and it just showed me that side of music, and I just fell in love with it. It was at the point where her arranger was teaching me uh, harmony on the keyboard. He would spend time teaching me all this stuff. These are the chord symbols that the pros use, and this is how you voice these chords on the piano, and I really dug it. I really loved it so much. And if she hadn't been in that world, then I might not have had access to these guys.
Okay, so you're in the world of film music and jazz, and so where does the classical side of it? Because certainly in my experience, very few musicians actually do both.
Actually, the classical side, of course, comes from the piano lessons you take as a kid, right? You get introduced, you know who Chopin is, you know who Brahms is, you know who Mozart and Beethoven are, and you develop a love for these composers. As a young kid, one day my dad came back from a business trip with this Deutsche Grammophon Beethoven symphonies box set, And he goes, "Okay, son, we're gonna listen. We were using open reel machines back then. He'd take the reel out and thread it into the empty reel, and we're gonna sit here and listen to Eroica for an hour. Um, and that was my entry into listening to symphonies. They eventually I'd be listening to them by myself. I never really thought of doing it until much later. I had already been arranging professionally, commercial arrangements, doing a lot of musical theater, and then, well, one day I found myself heading this chamber orchestra in a recording studio,
Yeah,
and we would be doing recording projects as you do, films, TV, and records, and the players. We would have these bits of downtime. There'd be a day where nothing was going on, and they were there, and they would go, "You know what? Why don't you take out some light overtures, some Rossini, some Mozart overtures, and learn how to do that." The because the problem that every conductor faces is that they don't have an orchestra to practice on, the same way that we have an instrument to practice on. But I was very lucky; I had an orchestra to practice on. For 5 days a week, I had an orchestra in front of me, and
yeah,
after a couple of years of doing that, and uh, getting some sort of control of this repertoire, we put up a season and we'd start doing performances and invited some
yeah.
soloists, and yeah, and it just sort of kept on going from there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you're also operating at a very high level with high level professional orchestras. How did that next step from being a fantastic composer conductor in the Philippines to then, a resident composer conductor in the Malaysia Philharmonic, Hong Kong Philharmonic? How did those steps happen?
Ah, um, Again, I got my sister to thank for that. In 2008, she received an invitation from the Hong Kong Philharmonic to perform a concert of Broadway and Disney tunes. So she had a bunch of arrangements that we had already performed in the Philippines many times, and okay, let's do that. Let's do it. So I went over. It was my first time conducting, an orchestra that level. Um, but for myself, the thing that I sort of relied on was that, because you go there, you can't not feel afraid, or a bit feel some trepidation before heading off to meet an orchestra like that. So, and another thing that I did for myself was to remember every single name of every member of the orchestra.
Oh, wow. Yeah,
So I would be able to relate to them as people. They wouldn't be nameless faces holding instruments, and I wouldn't call them second trumpet. I could actually call them by their name, and that would establish a human connection aside from the musical connection that you forge, during rehearsals. After the first rehearsal, they invited me back immediately to come do something later on.
yeah,
So it worked. That was a big step for me, and being with them a lot since then, I learned a lot about how this level of orchestra works,
yeah,
what they need from the podium, what they don't need from the podium. And before I had gone off to study music, I got a degree in communication and psychology. So working with an orchestra, and sort of analyzing how to deal with a group of people like this uh, really tickled that side of my brain.
yeah,
Just,
yeah,
yeah, how can I get the most out of them in the least amount of time,
yeah,
and ensuring the highest level of performance.
yeah,
So that's always a challenge, because you go to different countries, there are different cultures. Here in Malaysia, it's of course very different from an orchestra in the Philippines, or Hong Kong, or in Denmark, where I've had the chance to conduct as well. And it's always interesting to see how quickly you can tap into the collective psychology of an orchestra, and help them do what they do really well, and as well as they can.
that empathy that you have for the classical side, I have to imagine that it came from your early days working with these fantastic film arrangers and composers.
Well, you see how they interact with the musicians. You talk about being professional, and yes, you expect professionalism from all sides, but it's also very personal at the same time.
Yeah.
because you're talking about the way somebody plays, and to them that it could just fall right off them, or they could take it straight to their heart.
Leia is a kind of a superstar singer, and you are, superstar conductor. But when you work together, you are brother and sister. So how does that relationship work? Because obviously you're there, you're being professional, but
Yeah.
you've still got that brother sister thing. So
No,
how's
it
it work?
actually works well because we don't stop being brother and sister. It's almost the same thing that people ask me, what's it like conducting an orchestra for the first time? Well, my answer to that is I always feel better when I'm conducting an orchestra I know. And I mean, I couldn't possibly be more at ease with anyone other than my sister. Yeah. I mean, I've been her accompanist since I was 7. That was the first time I actually did a gig accompanying her on the piano. So it's just something we've always done together. It's never like, oh man, we're finally gonna work together. No, it's just something we've done since we were kids.
For those musicians that really want to be professional musicians, whether it's conductors or players, what kind of advice would you give them?
There was always a tremendous teacher involved. There was always they had encountered somebody who really gave them great advice and inspired them to do the next thing that they had to do. So whether it's your piano teacher or your band teacher, or a colleague who you go out with for dinner and sort of tells you, I mean, one of the greatest pieces of advice, well, I received a lot, but some of the ones that really stick out in front of my mind are from, I don't know if you know Jonathan Clark. He was our principal trumpet in the Hong Kong field.
Yes, very
Uh,
well, very well.
you know John Clark?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so we were at his house one day, and I was still very new to classical repertoire. I just started conducting them, and he said, if one of the things that people would want to know is if can you conduct Chaik 5 tomorrow? And you want the answer to be yes. So okay, well taken. I That really stuck.
yeah,
Really stuck. And very shortly after that, I was devouring scores and just going through repertoire
yeah,
because you just never know, right? He
yeah,
says, you never know. One of these days, you're going to. And sure enough, one day we had a guest conductor who was supposed to conduct Scheherazade and La Mer and got held up with passport issues and visa issues. And I had to jump on and do it.
yeah,
So that advice held me in good stead.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
because I'd
it's
already been, eating up those scores for a long time. So
yeah. Well, it's the same for musicians. Do you know 1812, all the pot boilers? Because that's going to be your first break when somebody goes ill and you've got 25 pieces that you have to sight read.
yeah.
It's the same. Yeah.
Another quick story. It's another great uh, trumpet teacher from Sydney. Um, One of my colleagues here studied with him, Paul Goodchild. I don't know if you know Paul Goodchild from
Yeah.
Sydney.
Yeah.
So my friend Matt was studying with Paul Goodchild, and okay, took him in as a sub for a Sydney Symphony rehearsal, and they were playing Tchaik Romeo and Juliet. And somewhere, in the beginning, he goes, "Mate, I have to go to the restroom. I'm going to be right back." So he goes to the restroom, and here comes the big pa, 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 and Paul's nowhere to be found. And this kid is forced to play it. And after he plays it, he's looking around, and Paul's right there, just watching it.
Oh, classic.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's a wonderful story. That the kid was probably terrified at the time, but the teacher had given him his wings. That at that moment, it's really about who you run into sometimes and what people giving you the right advice at the right time. I mean, Jaap van Zweden was my boss at the Hong Kong field,
Yeah.
and one of the greatest pieces of advice he had ever given me was, whatever you do, every day you wake up with the mind of a student, with the mind of a pupil. Because once you stop, your career's over. That's
Yeah,
it. Yeah. So you have to be devouring information. You have to be absorbing it from wherever you can steal it. You make it yours. It doesn't matter, but you gotta spend every day as a pupil and have that same sort of excitement and interest, like a kid. You never grow up.
that's
Basically.
right. Never grow up. Oh, Gerard, well, this has been absolutely inspirational. When we finished, I'm going to get in that room and do some practice. I'll tell you, you've inspired me.
You don't really need it, Paul, but I mean,
We always need to practice. That never
well,
stops.
yeah, that's true. That is true. Yeah.
But Gerard, thank you so much. It's been wonderful to talk to you. It's been great to see you, but particularly to hear you talk so passionately about music and with such great empathy. So thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you, Paul. It's been great.